Peter, whereas you really wouldn't ever need to size, and when I say size, I mean do detailed calculations on your dry conveyance, other than making sure you have the elevation or the slope necessary to make sure you're draining. As long as you use commercially available sizes that fit your downspouts and also fit the commercial downspout filter that you have available, you're not going to have any problems from a rainwater harvesting system perspective. But what about wet conveyance?
Well, wet conveyance has an additional complexity. Earlier on, we talked about it has the complexity of needing to ensure the water quality design was adequate, and it needs more maintenance. But wet conveyance is critically dependent on the right hydraulic design as well, because the entire system is driven by head from the roof. So kinetic energy creates head, height of water above the bottom point in the system creates the flow and the flow rates and so on in the system.
And what you're referring to is that distance A, correct?
Yes. So what you're looking at there is, you see how there's a roof gutter and then the downpipe flows until there's a break in the conveyance where there's air. Mm-hmm. So that's a break in the kinetic energy at that point there before it flows through the downspout filter. So that at the invert at the point where the water flows back into the downpipe from that downspout filter, which is there where that first dotted line is, that's where you're measuring your head or your kinetic energy from. And what you actually need, as shown as A in your diagram, you need more energy than the height and the losses that the system has to overcome so that the rainwater will actually flow into your rainwater storage. So what we have here is, rule of thumb is, if that bottom of the downspout filter is much higher than the inlet to the rainwater storage, your water is going to enter that. So
much higher. That doesn't sound like a rule of thumb.
Let's create a bit of a rule of thumb. Okay. So what we know is there'll be entry and exit losses. A bit of hydraulics. Apologies for that. So there's water in a downpipe doesn't flow as a jet. It flows, as we were talking about, and you showed that video just before, Michelle. It shows as a spiral, and it's very rare for water in that situation, rainwater, to flow as a jet. It's probably unlikely it'll flow as a spiral on the outside. But that flow is broken at the downspout filter and the process starts again. So from the bottom of your downspout filter, rainwater will be completely driven by head kinetic energy. Mm-hmm. So that point needs to be higher than the rainwater storage. However, there's an entry loss into that system, so it's a small loss on your head, and there's an exit loss where the rainwater enters your rainwater tank. So there's a couple of losses there. They're quite small. Mm-hmm. The other significant loss is friction within the pipe. So rule of thumb, if this rainwater storage is not too far away from the roof, the friction losses will be quite small because the friction losses are a function of distance through the pipe. The system there's also bend losses too in hydraulics. So generally speaking, you might lose if you're in PVC pipe, which is quite smooth, so the friction mm-hmm. losses will be small. You might lose, say, 2 meters of head for 1,000 meters of pipe. So your rainwater storage is not going to be 1,000 meters away. Mm. So your if it's 100 meters away, you're only losing 200 millimeters, whatever that is. That's 8 inches. Is that right? So, and if your rainwater storage is 10 meters away, you're only losing 20 millimeters of head, so which is just under an inch. So there are some rule of thumbs for this. So what the rule of thumb we're getting to, Michelle, is that people who ask me here, provided the rainwater storage is reasonably close to their roof, less than 100 meters, is we're saying to them, and there's not a huge amount of bends in their pipes, we're saying to them, if the highest point, the bottom of the downspout filter, if you've got one, is 300 millimeters or more above the entry to your storage, rainwater storage, it's probably going to work okay. So a foot.
And you don't have to pull out the Hayes and Williams formula to calculate it.
I know you're a bit nervous about that before, especially when I said there's bend losses and entry losses and exit losses. And I did some back of the envelope thinking about this just now. And I realised that these are quite small, and I realised we've been advising people in Australia that if it's greater than 300 millimeters above, it's most likely going to work properly.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. And then if you really wanted to geek out on your friction losses to figure those out, is that a decent formula to use? The Hayes and Williams formula for full pipe flow, the one that's shown in the book.
It's for full pipe flow, so you've got maximum friction loss here, where rainwater would be partial pipe flow. So if you knock out one of those...
But even in the wet system, wouldn't you have full pipe flow? Because it's basically full, right? And then it fills up and the head pressure pushes it through, right?
It'll be full where the rainwater fills up, yes. So it'd be partial full pipe flow. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but you could apply this, Michelle, and it'd be a good approximation, or you could use the rule of thumb.
Use the rule of thumb.